I was just going to find it in.
All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please note those in attendance?
All will be noted.
Thank you. Will the color guard please present the colors?
City White Bear Lake, the flag of your nation, and a pledge to follow. Color guard, present arms. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And ready, post.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular City Council meeting on March 14th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes passed. Moving on to item 2B, minutes of the City Council work session from March 21, 2023. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
The motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved.
Abstain.
One abstention. Moving on to item 3, adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda that anyone has? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? We have an agenda. Moving on to item 4, consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is adopted. All right, let's jump into item 5, visitors and presentations. We have a biannual police department report, and I understand we're going to swear in a few new officers tonight. So Chief Swanson, please.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. We're going to start with the swearing in. So thank you for the opportunity for us to bring our new officers to present them to you, and also for allowing us to have our honor guard present the colors before the swearing in. So tonight we have 3 new officers to swear in, and then after that I'll do my biannual report, and you'll see that we're going to have another one coming your way in the next few weeks. So to start with, they're all here. We have Officer Samantha Moriarty, who was the first one to start with us in the last few weeks. Her interest in becoming a police officer started at a very young age through her mom's affiliation with being a reserve and some local police officers in her community. She attended Blaine High School, received a degree from Northern Michigan University, and her law enforcement certificate from Century College. She says that she took a longer, not the traditional path right out of high school, but a little bit longer, but she is here to celebrate that goal. Prior to joining our department, Sam served as a community service officer for the Anoka County Sheriff's Department, a security officer for Minneapolis College, in addition to owning and operating her own business with her significant other. And tonight, Sam is joined by her daughter and boyfriend, and it sounds like some family online as well. And I will wait to call them all up until I'm done telling you about each one of them. So Officer Cole Campbell started with us the first week of March. Cole grew up in the Minnetonka area and attended Hopkins High School. After graduating from high school, Cole enrolled at Winona University, and he admits that he didn't really have a clear path quite yet, but took a law enforcement class in college and decided that that was going to be his career path. And he decided to focus at that point on law enforcement. Cole's interest growing up in team sports and the love for the outdoors are really going to align well throughout his career. Prior to starting with White Bear Lake, Cole worked in a few security roles and most recently at Allina Health United Hospital for the past 3 years. And tonight, Cole is joined by his family and his girlfriend, who will be pinning on his badge. Next, we have Officer Kyle Torvik, who also started training the first week of March. He developed an interest in law enforcement after taking a criminal justice course in high school, which the theme here seems to be taking classes in school and having cool cops come in and talk about their jobs, and maybe that'll solve our hiring crisis. So Kyle graduated from the Prior Lake area and later attended the University of North Dakota, where he earned a degree in criminal justice and then attended Hennepin Technical College for skills. Kyle worked also for Allina Health United Hospital as a security officer for 3 years prior to becoming a police officer at the University of Minnesota Police Department. He decided while working there that working in a suburb was more of his passion, so that Kyle and Cole were actually working together for a while just prior to starting with White Bear Lake. And Kyle is joined by his family, and his wife will be pinning his badge on. So I'm very excited to present them all. Ms. Crawford and I both had the opportunity to interview them all, and I think that they'll be a great fit for our community. Every one of them was drawn to our community for things like our community engagement. Cole was very particularly impressed with our involvement with the Special Olympics, and they all have a passion for connecting with the community and being part of the community, which is something that we feel strongly about. So I know that they'll be a great fit for our department. So with that, I'll have just the 3 officers come up. They'll read their oath of office with Callie, and then we'll have their significant others come up to pin the badges on.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your names individually. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota, and will discharge and faithfully execute the duties devolving upon me as a police officer for the city of White Bear Lake, without fear or favor, to the best of my judgment and ability. Congratulations.
So with that, we will have the badge pinners come on up and pin the badges on.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Again, thank you for welcoming our new officers, and as I said, we'll be back in a few weeks. With that, I'm going to let them go have cake, and then I'm going to give my annual report from the chair. So thank you. Maybe we can just take a brief pause.
Sure.
And you guys can go have cake. Okay for me to start, Mayor?
Please, Chief, jump right in.
All right, thank you. So Mayor and members of the council, I am here for the first of my two recaps for the year. And the first few slides are a little bit of duplicates, partially because usually the audience is somebody different, and I wasn't sure at what point we were going to do this in order for our new officers' families. So our police department, with these three and our new one, is technically fully staffed, so that's great. We have a few people out for various reasons, but and then we have these ones that are in training. So it's a good place to be, to have great candidates, and as you saw here, they're very supported by their families. We have a department that is led by the chief of police, and then we have two captains. We have a patrol captain and an administrative captain. So the patrol captain oversees the 4 sergeants that then oversee the 18 police officers that are assigned to patrol. We also have 4 investigators and 2 school resource officers, and they report directly to our administrative captain. The investigators, we have 3 of them are assigned to general investigations. We don't have like a major crime investigation. We don't have specific investigations. However, we do have one that is assigned to the Violent Crime Enforcement Task Force through Ramsey County, and that's also known as VSET. And then our 2 school resource officers primarily do our juvenile crimes. And then in addition to that, we have 5 community service officers. That is where we are currently short. We only have 4, but we are interviewing for 1 this week. And then we have 4 administrative staff, which are our 2 records, or 3 records technicians. 1 deals solely with business licensing, background checks. And then we have our evidence and body cam digital media specialist. And when we are full strength, we have 31 sworn police officers. And they are assigned to 4 different patrol teams. Each one is supervised by a sergeant. So they have a pretty easy schedule, which is a typical schedule in policing. They work either Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they rotate every other Saturday. So they always work with the same people on their shift. We have a day shift and a night shift, obviously, and they are 11 and a half hours long. They start from 6 a.m. or 7:30 a.m., or the evening shifts start at 5:30 p.m. or 7 p.m. The department has filled all of the officer vacancies. We swore in Officer Fink a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago, with Officer Sorensen, and then tonight we swore in our 3 new officers that have all been hired in 2023. So those are currently the only 3 officers in training. And if you remember from previous presentations, they're typically in training about 12 to 14 weeks, and They spend 1 week doing all their administrative things, getting their use of force training done, their firearms training, and then they are assigned or partnered with a training officer for anywhere from 12 to 14 weeks. It can be longer. And so those 3 have been hired just this year in the last few weeks, so they're still in training. And then we will bring our newest officer to you sometime after April 17th. All of our officers are licensed by the Minnesota Post Board, and I just kept this slide in here because I think it's very important to remember, because a lot of times people talk about the training or how are police officers licensed or who's overseeing them. So not only are we overseen by our council, our city manager, me, They're captains, they're sergeants. We all report to the same licensing board. And the Minnesota Post Board not only regulates the licensing of the police officers, but it regulates the curriculum that goes into police schools. So when those objectives change or when new criteria come out from discussions within the greater community of Minnesota and there's changes that have to be enacted, it goes to all of the colleges that are training police officers. They have to be PPOE licensed, or they are audited just like we are as a police department by the Post Board. It's just a different division of the Post Board. And then not only that, they manage the mandated policies that are put in place, and many of those are they're all on our city website. If you went from one department to the next, you would see that they're very similar. And then they also oversee some discipline, not all discipline. It's more when it's of criminal nature, and when a department has something disciplinable, we do have to report it to the Post Board. They just don't manage the investigation of it. It's managed by outside entities. All officers are required to complete a 48 hours of training every 3 years because their license is renewed every 3 years. So it's very similar to other professions that have a licensing component to them. But ours, the state statutes dictate a little bit of what we're going to be trained in. So our officers are required to complete 6 hours of crisis intervention training, 4 in autism, and at least 1 in conflict management and mediation, 1 in implicit bias, community diversity, and cultural differences. And the remaining 4 credits can be taken in any of those 4 categories. So there's 16 there, and then the other 48 can be, the other 48 also include our firearms, our use of force, and our driving school. And then sometimes there's leftovers. So most officers get, I would say they probably average about 150 hours of training every 3 years, but we do have to make sure that they have these 16, otherwise we can't renew their post license. And the Post Board, that's new. They didn't used to track that, and now they do track that it's in each of those disciplines. Some of the partnerships that we have that are of note, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but we do have our community advocate program through the Northeast Youth and Family Services. It's important to note that we have a new advocate in our that we are working with. We share him with Roseville, Mounds View, New Brighton, and St. Anthony, and I believe there's another suburb that is looking to sign on. In the short time that he's been there, it's probably been about 4 to 6 months. He's done a really good job. It's just a great resource for us. We aren't inundating him with calls, but when we do utilize him for calls, it's been a great resource because people don't always want to deal with the police. They would rather deal with somebody that's not in uniform, that has some different resources. When the police are there, they assume they're in trouble, and really we just get called because somebody doesn't maybe know how to manage a situation, and it's just nice to have that resource available to us. And I wrote in there in this slide that the primary things that they deal with are mental health issues, family instability, or medical care. We've used them for seniors that are aging and in their homes and maybe shouldn't be in their homes still because they're found wandering in the streets, or Alzheimer patients. So we've not kept it to people that are involved with the police just because they're scaring people, but it's more because maybe the family doesn't have the resources. And sometimes it's just nice to have another person that's there to help guide the family, because there might be differences within the family about how to care for somebody, and so it's great to have that resource. So the other partnership that you've heard about in council meetings that we've utilized a lot in the last few months is our Officer Wellness Mental Health program. We have recently contracted with Mesa Consulting with Jonathan Bunt, and he is a mental health professional that is on staff, and he visits with our officers throughout the month. But we really leaned on him when we had our officer-involved shooting, because he was able to lead debriefs for our officers or provide them with resources in managing the stress that came with that incident and how to come back to work and, what kind of emotions or things that they had to navigate after that. So it's been a great resource for us, and it is pretty cutting edge. When I tell other departments that we have that, we share him with a few departments, but other agencies are very envious to have that resource because we can't do everything. As an employer, you want to do everything, but we can't specialize in everything. And so to have this tool, this is his specialty, and it's a great tool to have. We have some other partnerships that we are still very active with. We have, like I said, the one detective on the Violent Crime Enforcement Task Force. They do a lot with drug investigations, but at the same time, they also deal with some of the more violent crimes that are going on. So not to be confused, this is not the Sheriff's Department team. This is a cooperative team between St. Paul and Ramsey County. It's the one that we've been on for quite some time, probably at least 15 years. And we just have one detective assigned, and he primarily deals with drug investigations. We have 2 members on the SWAT team and 1 member on Mobile Field Force. And then we work closely with the Minnesota BCA, the other Ramsey County suburban police departments. And those 2 were very prevalent for us in the last few months as we navigated some of the calls that we've had since the first of the year. And then we rely heavily, and we will this summer, on our police volunteers. We have about 10 police reserves, and we have a couple waiting to get on, and we just are onboarding them. Our CERT members is the Community Emergency Response Team. They're the ones at Market Fest that are wearing the lime green shirts and sometimes have the yellow vests on. We have about 80 members of that. They are incredibly active. So last year we hosted our Easter egg hunt, and that was kind of led by 2 of our community service officers who have moved on. One is one of our officers, and one became a dispatcher for the State Patrol, and the CERT team asked if they could take that on. So they have completely organized it, stuffed the eggs, found the Easter Bunny, and they are going to coordinate that on Saturday. Obviously, the police are involved, but that's the kind of things they like to do. So it's great because I don't know that most CERT teams do that. I think that they wait for a natural disaster to come along, and then they get called to action. Ours have done, they've helped us with ground searches for senior citizens that are missing from, care centers. So they are a great resource. Our Citizens Police Academy is every fall, and we still maintain very good attendance at that, and I know some of you have participated in some of those events. And then lastly, we have Triad, which is our senior citizen group that we do cooperatively with the Ramsey County Sheriff's Department, us, and the Senior Center. So on to the calls for the past year. So our calls are actually down. They were closer to about 23,000 in 2021, and now this year we had just over 21,000. And so I've tried to break them down a little bit more than we've seen in the past, just to give you a better, capture a better idea of what we have going on a given day. This picture here is one of the things that they do. When they're out at the middle of the night and we're sleeping, they're taking pictures of the northern lights. But the first one that I have listed here is the police proactive visits. So that call, when officers go and they are walking through downtown White Bear, pulling on doors to make sure the doors are locked, that's a police proactive visit. We have calls on our parking ramp where sometimes people are loitering in the parking ramp after hours. So that would be a police proactive visit. We had 58 burglaries, which is when someone breaks into a home or a business. We had 6 robberies, and people tend to confuse burglaries and robberies. Robberies are of a person. So if somebody comes into a business and steals a purse from a customer, that's a robbery. If they break into a home or business and steal property but don't confront a person or have that confrontation with the person, then it's a burglary. We had 528 thefts. The majority of our thefts tend to be crimes of opportunity, when people leave their car doors unlocked, or maybe leave something out in a front yard at night, or leave a bike not locked up. Unfortunately, not everybody's honest, and they take those opportunities to steal other people's property. So the disorderly and disputes gets a little bit cloudy as we move to the next slide, because sometimes those morph into domestic assaults or fights. But the disorderly disputes tends to be when somebody gets into a disagreement with somebody else and there's not an arrest that takes place. So we had 549 of those, which we do go to quite a few of them, and you'll see that we have assaults on the next page. 582 alarms, and what that is if somebody in the city of White Bear Lake has an alarm that goes off, the police automatically get called, we go to it. The only time we ever cancel is if the alarm company cancels us. But if they don't cancel us, or the person who's on scene can't give the proper secret code, then we still go to it. They do get an alarm card, because after so many alarms, and I believe it's 3, they can be charged by the city under ordinance. We had 409 juvenile incidents. Most of those are things that take place, like kids skateboarding, or maybe curfew, or some of those tend to be with school calls. And then we had 3,082 assists to fire. So the thing to note with the fire and medical calls is we don't go on every medical now that we have a full-time fire department. They tend to go on those, but if the only ones that we don't typically go on are the ones at a care center, a doctor's office, or where maybe police aren't needed. Police can tend to still be there before the fire, just based on wherever they are. So we will go to many of them, but not all of them. So I know Chief Peterson did his presentation a few weeks ago, and those numbers aren't going to line up, but that's why, because we don't go to all of them. We had 130 domestic assaults, and those are assaults where it was between 2 people with a significant relationship. It can be a stepfather and child. It can be a parent's boyfriend or girlfriend and child. It can be husband and wife, boyfriends and girlfriends. We had assaults that were non-domestic related were 79. So sometimes those disputes turn into somebody getting hurt, and then that's when it becomes an assault. The fights, like I said, kind of goes with the dispute. It's just how the dispatchers code it, but it doesn't necessarily have any relevance to somebody being arrested, not like the domestic assault and assaults do. Harassment, I think it's self-explanatory, but harassment is when somebody's picking on somebody and they won't stop, but it takes the police to tell them to stop. The welfare checks and persons in crisis are probably 2 of the very common ones that we see on a regular basis, and sometimes one morphs into the other. If somebody's worried about somebody, maybe their friend is making concerning statements, or they can't reach somebody for the last few days, that's usually coded a welfare check, and we will go check on them. If they're fine, we don't change it to another call type. We leave it the same call type so we know accurately what we were called there for. The persons in crisis tends to be people that are suffering from mental health issues, or just, it doesn't mean that they need to be transported. Sometimes they just need to talk to somebody. Maybe they need some resources. And then the other big one there is our assist citizen. It's everything that doesn't fall into another category. And so maybe somebody's standing at the back door wanting to turn in forms for a gun permit or a dog license. Those are assist citizens. Or if they just have a question and they want an officer to come out and help them, that would be an assist citizen. And then suspicious activity is when somebody says, hey, there's somebody outside looking in car windows, and we do get a lot of calls for that. And then the warrants are warrant arrests. So 117 people were arrested for warrants. Here's the big one, which is our traffic stops. So we had a total of 4,369 traffic stops in 2022, which is a little up, I believe, from the year before. Of those, half of them were warnings issued. So unfortunately, the people listening that got a ticket are wondering why they weren't the other half. I can't answer to that. Might just be the speed they were going, or might be what they were doing. Sometimes the traffic stops result in DWI arrests or an accident, and so we have those numbers there as well. And then we do a lot of parking enforcement. The majority of that parking enforcement right there is snowbirds. So we do parking enforcement at Market Fest and Manitou Days, but we try not to tag people during those community events because we want people to come enjoy our downtown. We want them to enjoy our events. So we work really hard to find the owner and not tag anybody for that. So the majority of that parking enforcement is the snowbirds or maybe parked in an area too long. We do a lot of community engagement events. I'm not going to go through every one of them because you hear about them often, but it is something we pride ourselves on and we really look forward to. This is the part of the winter where we're like getting bored, and now we're in a really small spot because we have construction going on. I hear you're going to see that. It's like living in a dorm right now. I mean, there's tape on some people's floor just to make sure it's in jokes, but it's to make sure that we each have our space. So as you can see the list there, the next one that we have is our Easter egg hunt. But what's great with these events is so many of them we coordinate and we initiate, but they're supported by our businesses and our local community members. The donuts last year were donated by Kowalski's and Cub. The floats with the fuzz was at Tally's. The Cops on the Course is with Gem Lake Golf Course. And the Touch-A-Truck, we have people begging us to come put vehicles in the Touch-A-Truck event. So that's what's important to see, all the different events that we have and people asking us to participate in that. So we have that, and that's all I have. So with that, I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chief. I'm glad to hear that we're at full strength in terms of staffing.
We should knock on wood.
I know it's been a tough process. Linda
Right.
keeps me informed. I know I'll acknowledge for the council, it's very difficult to hire law enforcement in general, and we've been fortunate to be able to hire several, so that's good news. Council, do we have any questions for the chief before we move on to the next item? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I want to pick up on a strand of conversation we started the last time you presented. So let me just make sure. The data you presented is for the full year 2022?
The data, yes, this data was 2022.
Cool. So you identified for us about 11 to 12,000, what I would call either crimes or medical kind of activities, not the proactive activity, which works out to about 30 to 35 every day by folks on shift. The medicals were about 3,000, a little over 3,000. Would those be included in the data that Chief Peterson shared with us? So Chief Peterson gave us the bigger list because not all of them are police officer engaged, and we report that to our citizens, but the numbers you give us are where police officers are also involved in some way. Is that correct?
Correct.
Cool. So a little over a third of those 12,000 are traffic stops. Do you sense that our traffic stops are going up, down, or staying about the same? What's the trend that we're looking for?
Councilmember Edberg, I would say that they are consistent. Like from last year to this year, it is probably within a couple hundred. We have had some years where they're higher, like our DWI arrests are higher, but COVID really put a crimp on that because we were closed. Places were closed. People have had trouble getting bar staff. Not all bars are open as late as they used to be, and Uber became a big thing. So I think that the traffic stops in general have stayed the same. A part of that is because we get funding from the state and the feds that allow us to do off-duty details. So an officer might work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but they're going to come in on their day off and work an overtime shift and do just traffic. And they don't help on calls unless they're needed to. I mean, it would have to be a pretty significant call for them to break away. That's all funded overtime. And so I think that's one reason that our statistics still remain so high, because let's face it, we've been really short-staffed all year. I have shifts that have never been as low as they've been, and so they're running call to call to call. If we have our 5 people on shift or 6 people on shift, there's a lot more time to make those traffic stops. They wouldn't be if we didn't have that grant-funded overtime.
Cool. Got it. Thank you. So as you look at the biggest issue from traffic perspective that I get in my ward is speed in the neighborhoods. anything, are we seeing any breakthroughs, so I know we have certain tactics that we use. I know that folks have made requests for your speed is the flashing. Any news to report or ideas on what we can do with that? Or am I looking at the wrong end of the elephant? Is that not an issue for our community?
I would say, those calming devices help. But at the same time, people get very complacent with them, especially when they stay in the same spot. So our city engineer might have a better answer to this. But I would say that moving them around is very helpful because you don't know. And then you don't know if there's an officer standing nearby. There are other calming opportunities out there, I'm sure, but those can be pretty significant roundabouts and things like that. We might not be the community that is appropriate for that. Speed enforcement is probably the best thing that we can do. I know, particularly in your ward today, the sergeant spent a lot of time doing speed control on County Road E and Bel Air and County Road F. So I think that's probably our best tool to still use. For sure, there's other things, but I don't think we're necessarily missing the boat on them. Everybody would like the speed to be brought down in their neighborhoods. One of the things that kind of amps that up is when we redo the roads. And of course, nobody's going to say, I don't want my road redone, because we want our roads redone. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game.
Okay. Our citizens, I'm not sure I guess they would be the mice, and they are incredibly active. So, last question. You mentioned the Ramsey County SWAT and VSET. Is that through the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office, or is that an alliance of the non-sheriffs? And is there anything you'd care to tell us about our relationship and coordination with the Sheriff's Office?
Sure. So the VSET is the Violent Crime Enforcement Task Force. They report to a board, and the board is the chiefs of police in the suburbs. So there's one member from the Sheriff's Department that's a voting member, but there's also voting members from St. Paul, New Brighton, Roseville, Maplewood, White Bear Lake, and I don't know if I said New Brighton. Mounds View. So we are the voting members. So that one is directly underneath the board. The SWAT team is managed by the Sheriff's Department, and I will say that they are very well managed. They have a great commander who's in charge of them, and he has been for a large majority of my time as chief. And what I like with them is they will come out, they'll navigate a situation with us, but we're still in control of a lot of the decisions that are made. And I may have mentioned this in a previous council meeting, but they don't come out like they used to come out. And, we used to see a lot more standoffs. There is a lot of different criteria that is thought about before actually deploying the SWAT team, because they don't want, if the person is alone in their home and they're not going to harm anybody else, then sometimes it's better to just let that be and let it work itself out. Maybe officers will stand by in the area, but certainly we recognize bringing the SWAT team in amps it up, but we couldn't have done it without the help that they provided us earlier this year. And, we don't even have to call when something like that happens. That call goes out, and every entity comes from all over the metro. And I think that is a great partnership that we all have, knowing that we will be there to help, but it is very well managed by that SWAT commander.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions for the chief? All right, let's move on. You got another item on the agenda here.
I do. So in your packets, you have the executive summary from the Minnesota Security Consortium on our body-worn camera audit, as well as, I believe, a resolution. So the police department put body cams in place about 4 years ago. We fully started using them just over 3 years ago. And if you remember, we brought that body cam policy to the council when we were in the exploring phase of implementing body cams. One component of body cams is that we are mandated to have a biannual audit, of our use of those body cams, and that we had started this process last year with the state auditor's department, and they were not able to help us. They initially said they would complete it for us, the body cam audit in early spring, which would have been appropriate for our timing, and then asked me to get back to them in the summer, which I did, and then they asked me to get back to them in October, and in November they told us they were not able to do it for us. So then we had to find somebody else, and we found the Minnesota Security Consortium to audit us. They were used by several suburban departments, which is why we selected them. So the department is the one who has access. The police department is the one who has access to the system and the body cams, and we engaged the security consortium to do the audit, and what that entails is we have to sit with them as they randomly pick different case numbers to review to make sure that we labeled the cases, to put the case numbers on them, categorized them for the right retention period, and that there are certain situations that need to be reviewed by supervisors, specifically use of force or officer-involved shootings. So they sit with us and review those. We don't know which cases they're going to do. In this case, we did 2021 and 2022, and that was about 45,000 cases that we have responded to in those 2 years, and they selected 52 of them over those two different years. And specifically, the auditor was looking at, did we use the body cam when we were supposed to, according to our policy? Did we label it with a case number, and did we label it with the retention period? So I'm pleased to announce that we did successfully complete that. I don't know. I don't know what the threshold is for them to, if we were not using them appropriately, what that threshold is. We do have very good compliance with our body cams. Our officers love having the body cams, as do I think our community, and they're using them appropriately and effectively, and they have helped us with a lot of our cases. You know, there's naturally in any business, there's complaints. The body cam is very easy because sometimes people have a different interpretation of what happened at a call. If the police are involved with you, usually that's kind of scary, or it could be frightening to you, and you might have a different recollection than what we have. And sometimes when you go back and see the body cam, you realize it did happen the way, it might not have happened the way that you believed. So staff is recommending that the council adopt the attached resolution accepting the body-worn camera audit as required under statute.
Thank you, Chief. Council, do we have any questions or comments for the Chief on this? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So 52 out of 45,000 is less, it's 1/10 of 1%. Are we confident that we've got a big enough sample? Is there a standard for how many? Is there what? This is a big deal, okay? And I think we all recognize what's at stake, so receiving the report is important. I like the results. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what's the context.
I would say that it's sufficient because we employed an outside agency that's what they do for their job, that this is their expertise. They have to submit that report to the state auditor's department and the state representatives. So we didn't select. They could have looked at all 45,000. It is time consuming, but I feel confident because I know that we're reviewing them as supervisors on a regular basis every day. And in that 52, the only errors that we found were 2 times an officer didn't put the case number in it, but that just is for the ease of searching for the call, but you can still search for the call on between a certain date by that officer, and it aligns with our records management system. So not having the case in there wasn't as detrimental as not putting the right retention period in there, because if you didn't have the right retention period in there, we wouldn't still have access to the call, which we do.
So when the report says in virtually all instances, it's those 2 that you're talking about.
Correct.
Got it. Is our current retention policy 2 years?
Not on everything. It is on, the current retention policy is not 2 years on everything. It is on certain criteria. So investigations, use of force, those are 2 years, but some are 90 days. It's noted in our policy, which is on the website.
Okay, thanks. And then I also noted no discharges, no officer discharged their weapon during the audit period. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you recall, you've been with us for a while, how rare an instance is that in your career? Are we talking handfuls?
We just had our first in my entire career of 23 years, and that was in 2023, so it was not part of the the audit period.
Very cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, anyone else? Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We spent a pretty good amount of time putting this policy in place, if I remember. I think we had some model policy for maybe League of Cities or something, but I'm just sitting here thinking we haven't heard about it since, which is a good thing, right? So I guess my question is, well, obviously it's working. There was the back end IT was really the big challenge, or one of the big challenges. So we've got that all figured out. I assume. My question is, if you had needed changes to the policy to make it work better, you would come to us. So I'm just making an assumption that the policy that we put in place is working.
Correct. It is working. Yes. And maybe the city attorney can correct me. I believe we only needed to conduct a public hearing when we put the body cams in play. If there were additions to the policy, I don't know that by statute it has to come to the council.
Oh, okay.
But there's not a reason not to at the same time. I mean, we want to be transparent for the same reason we put the policy online, and we are following the model policy of the League of Minnesota Cities and the Post Board. So I feel confident in it. I think the bigger challenge is to make sure an agency is utilizing them as they're supposed to, which we are. A good question. Thank you.
Anyone else on the council? Or Ms. Crawford, did you have something to add?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, I just want to reiterate, I think everybody knows how I feel about our police department, but Minnesota Security Consortium did recognize us and acknowledge us for how simple it was for them to conduct this audit, meaning how organized our files were. And I think that I just want to note that and commend the chief on that and our department. So thank you.
Very good.
If I could add,
Please.
Ms. Crawford, really the credit goes to our body-worn camera specialist, Carrie Varco. So we have a system called Motorola that isn't widely used in Minnesota. We chose that one because it worked very well with our radios, because our radios are Motorola. And I think that she has probably educated some of their new staff, because they have changed staff over time. And like you said, it's the technology piece, and she's very good at that. But she was very well organized and able to help him through that audit.
Very good. Council, I'd entertain a motion to approve
Approval
the resolution.
of the resolution.
Second.
Motion a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The resolution passes. Thank you, Chief, for the report and for everything. All right, moving on to item 6, public hearings. We have nothing scheduled. So we'll jump into item 7, unfinished business. Second reading of an ordinance amending the 2023 fee schedule. Ms. Crawford, are you taking this?
I am. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. On February 28th, the council adopted an ordinance amending the municipal code, adopting new chapter 1128 to permit sidewalk cafes. That approved ordinance allows fees to be established in the city's fee schedule for sidewalk cafe permit application, permit renewal, and administrative penalties. So the proposed additions are generally to cover staff time to review the applications. Again, an application that is not that is borne by one business or a handful of businesses, not by the general taxpayers. So what we are looking at here for the second reading, it's the same as the first reading, but I'll just quickly go over it. So for the permit application, the initial application, we're looking at a fee of $150, renewal with significant changes, $125, a renewal with no changes, $60, and a sidewalk cafe permit violation of $100. And these are annual permits that will be submitted, are reviewed by anywhere from 3 to 8 staff members, including myself. So generally, we charge fees that cover staff time to conduct that review, and this is significantly lower than what that fee would really be, but this is pretty much in line with what other cities are charging and what we feel staff feels comfortable charging for these permits. Thank you.
Thank you. So one quick question to start with. I don't know if, I can't remember if we talked about it at the last council meeting, but what do you see, maybe Mr. Coffey can weigh in, what do you see as a significant change? I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that would look like. Oh, hang on, that's significant enough. It's going to be 125 versus whatever we land on for that just basic renewal.
Sure. I can start, and Mr. Coffey, if you want to add, it would be maybe a layout change, or if you're proposing to add additional seating, or if we need to go and remeasure, the sidewalk to make sure that there's appropriate right-of-way for pedestrians. I don't know if you have anything, or the addition of liquor where you didn't have liquor previously.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. It's really just that the layout change. So if we have to do those measurements or survey right away, find property corners, things like that, so we can see where they have it laid out. But that would be significant staff time to do that.
So to clarify, when we say layout, we kind of mean the footprint of what their patio is, not where they're putting tables and chairs. It's that overall scope.
Yes, the footprint of the cafe.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I mentioned in the last council meeting, I can get on board with the $150 initial application fee. I'll defer to city staff, and when they say it takes a good bit of time and it touches multiple departments when you've never done it before, I still think we can soften the $60 for the renewal for those situations where it truly is, hey, we've been doing this for years and we're going to do the same thing as we have every other year. So I'd be open to amending it so that the renewal with no changes is lower than what it currently is. With that, council, what do we think? Councilmember Walsh.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you. I think everything's in order in the resolution except that renewal with no changes. I think you're going to use some staff time on it. I'm not denying that, and it's going to cost us some time and money. Time is money. Just for some reason, it just feels like same as last year. It should be zero, not less than 60. I'd go all the way to zero. So I mean, if no one else wants to do that, I'm not going to, not going to filibuster or anything. But that's where I'm at. I think it could be zero, and we can eat that.
Anyone else on the council? Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to trust that staff knows what the time is. If this was not using public property for private gain, I'd probably agree with you, but it's not. And I'm going to trust staff on what their time is needed on that. So, again, I'm going to be like Bill and go, I'm not going to filibuster. Let's come up with a number tonight. I'm comfortable with 60, but zero I am not comfortable with.
Anyone else on the council have a thought? Councilmember Hughes.
Yeah, and I would add to that, this is really only a benefit for a few establishments. So it's not even like we're covering all restaurants. It's not really a fairness issue. I think it's fair that they have to pay for something so special on public property.
Anybody have another thought, a motion to amend, a motion to approve this? What do we want to do?
Move to approve. Second.
With a motion and a second, any further discussion?
I'm trying to count votes down here.
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The memorandum or fee schedule is adopted as written. All right. Moving on to item 7B, the tobacco license renewal. Who's kicking this off? Ms. Crawford?
Yes. Mayor, members of the council, the city's municipal code requires that certain business activities in the city be licensed and comply with the terms of the license or ordinance. City licenses have a one-year term expiring on March 31. At the March 14th City Council regular meeting, the council approved business license renewals for all but 2 establishments. The City Council voted to continue the discussion for tobacco license renewals for M&J Tobacco and Nothing But Hemp. A moratorium prohibiting the sale of THC products for a 12-month term was approved at the September 27th, 2022 City Council meeting. The purpose of that moratorium is to allow an opportunity for the city to conduct a study to consider the development and adoption of appropriate legal regulations. While the moratorium has been in effect, the police department has conducted compliance checks on the prohibited sale of THC products. 5 tobacco licensed establishments failed the first round of compliance checks in November 2022, and the second round in March of 2023. M&J Tobacco and Nothing But Hemp failed both of those compliance checks. The response to failing 2 compliance checks resulted in the City Council voting to delay the consideration of their tobacco license renewal to tonight's meeting. Violation of selling THC products can be considered basis for denial of a tobacco license. Staff drafted 2 resolutions in your packet, one to approve tobacco license renewals and one to deny the tobacco license renewals for the City Council's consideration. The establishments were notified in writing of tonight's meeting that they will be given an opportunity to speak with the City Council, and I believe both of the establishments are here tonight to be heard by the City Council. So with that, I can stand for questions or if the city attorney has anything else to add at this point.
All right. Well, seeing none, why don't we jump right in? I understand there are representatives from M&J Tobacco and Nothing But Hemp here. I'm indifferent to who goes first, so whoever would like to jump up to the podium and say what you need to say, please do now. And then as you come up to the podium, please just state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. It has been quite a long day. I'm going to try to make this as quickly as possible. But distinguished members of the council, Your Honor, Mayor, I do appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Could you just give us your name?
It's coming. My name is Bryce Holstead. I represent my client, Mon Altamimi. He goes by Mike. My business address is 2020 County Road F East, White Bear Lake. I am a practicing attorney here in White Bear Lake. I practice mainly real estate and civil in White Bear. However, I also serve as the Albert Lea criminal attorney for the city of Albert Lea and the assistant civil attorney for the city of Albert Lea. I want everyone to know at this council that I take no pleasure in being in an adversarial position against this council. I was born in this town. I learned to skate on that lake. I learned to swim in that lake. My daughter will as well. But I do think there are some important points that need to be made, both on behalf of my client specifically and on behalf of the process that the city has chosen to take so far, which is the basis of why we're standing here today. That said, because of this opportunity, I hope the council and the mayor considers what I have to say with serious consideration prior to making their determination as to whether or not to renew my client's livelihood in the form of their tobacco sales license. First of all, I see this as a relatively simple issue. If you take a look at section 1104.040 of the White Bear City Ordinance, it states the bases for denial of a tobacco license. Now, without reading them all verbatim, I will state I assume that at the previous council meeting when the city attorney mentioned typically non-renewals are based on tobacco sales and typically they're tied to the enumerated bases. I think that might have been an attempt to clarify that usually, but maybe we could consider to not renew them. I would say there is a reason that these itemized reasons for denial of licenses are in place. It has to do with the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution as applied against the states via the 14th. The due process clause applies for any deprivation of life, liberty, or property. This case has to deal with property. A license that is necessary for feeding your family is considered protected by the due process right of the Constitution. I will also highlight of item 2, which is listed as a basis to deny, the specific words convicted and the words relating to tobacco products or delivery devices. I want to make it clear that there's a reason that that's in the code, particularly convicted, and it's an important one, and it has to do, again, with the due process rights. whoever wrote this code, I assume your predecessors, I don't think any of you were that old, they understood that it's important prior to removing somebody's property right that they have an opportunity to cross-examine witnesses. They have an opportunity to hear the accused of, or hear who is accusing them of the crime, as well as, at the very least, hearing what that crime is that they're accused of violating. Now, there are some other concerns based on the previous meeting that was held that both the city attorney alluded to and other members claimed that my client has been charged with the violation of that ordinance, specifically the ordinance against the sale of tetrahydrocannabinoids, I think I got that right, that contain more than 0.001% of tetrahydrocannabinoids, products that contain more than 0.001 tetrahydrocannabinoids, commonly known as THC. I'll refer to it as that from now on if I ever have to. That's not true. And unfortunately, I feel the need to remind everyone in this room, as well as the council, referring to someone and claiming that they are charged with a crime when they in fact are not is defamation per se under Minnesota law. Furthermore, using that as a basis to deny a license could subject the cities to significant damages as a result for relying on that basis that is not true for the non-renewal of the license. Now, I think that's important because my client is not charged with violating said ordinance. In fact, I happened to be there. If you read the police report on the second, one of those classic scenarios of being at the right place at the right time, rather be lucky than good. I was meeting with my client's business partner for a construction project of my own house. As I walked in, the compliance officer was there, and he asked to talk with us. He talked to us about saying that he bought a product and he believed that it might be in violation of the statute or the ordinance passed by the city of White Bear Lake. However, I clarified with him that our understanding is these products, and we verified this with the manufacturer, contains less than 0.001% tetrahydrocannabinoids, THC. I just stated I wouldn't say that again, and I did. I apologize. Anyways, the officer stated, well, that is why we are not charging, because we don't know. I think that's an important point. The basis presented today for the reason of not renewing my client's license is presented as a violation of a city ordinance, of which has not been adjudicated. It has not even been charged. There are 3 ways to charge in Minnesota, typically with a misdemeanor. There is a citation that is the same as basically a speeding ticket. It's instantaneous. You're written a speeding ticket, it's immediately sent to Minsus, you are charged. That does not exist to my client for a violation of this ordinance. Second is a formal complaint. And a formal complaint is, for our city attorney, he could explain, it's very similar to the civil process. It's done as what is either called a summons or an order for detention. The distinction between an order for detention and a summons is the basis of whether they are held in custody or currently not held in custody. A summons would draw them in for a hearing, which is called an arraignment. The arraignment is very important. At the arraignment, they are read the charges so that they can understand what the basis of their accusation is so that they could enter a plea. That plea, at that time, could be guilty or it could be not guilty. However, my client has never had the opportunity to say whether he is guilty or not because he has not been charged. Again, why would he not be charged? Well, as a city attorney, I can tell you a lot of misdemeanor allegations from my office do go uncharged. The main reason for a lack of what is called probable cause. Probable cause is necessary to support any charge for any criminal action, misdemeanors included. Now, it makes sense as to why the officer said this won't be charged. Because in my opinion, my client, and not even, it's a fact, he has not violated the ordinance. He has complied with the ordinance. And that's the basis as to why he's not charged today. So I'm a little perplexed as to why this has become an issue at this instance. This isn't the first time the city has taken actions in a manner that could be described as arbitrary and capricious. The first was the instance of getting the tobacco license in the first place. I do want to reiterate, that's how I met my client. He was in the same building as me over in Colonial Place. I think it's called Colonial Place. It's the former Burnett building. That's how I know it, right on 35. And my client was determining his future as to whether or not he wanted to start into a tobacco license. When he decided to do so, I evaluated the code, explained to him the rules as to how you can be considered for a tobacco license or not. He took my advice. He went to apply for the tobacco license. He was told by the city that he could not apply for a tobacco license. And by the way, this is before the ordinance with the moratorium. I got involved and reminded the city, the code says these are the bases for applications for tobacco license, and I didn't even claim to the city that you couldn't deny it. I said you have to make a decision. He has the right, based on the code, to apply for the license. Well, he went and returned to try to apply for the license. He was told at that point they would take the application, but they would not accept the fee. More trickery, more arbitrary and capricious action on behalf of the city. You do, in fact, have to accept the application fee, whether you think it's going to be approved or not. Luckily, this council did hear, likely, in one manner or not, the issues of which I was bringing to their attention, and they did approve the license. Now, those are the legal reasons why I don't see how legally you can refuse to not renew my client's license. He has not violated the ordinance. More importantly, he has not conducted any crime of any sort that has to do with the sale of tobacco. I'm going to give you more, though. I'm going to give you reasons as to why you should want to renew my client's license. And it can be summed up in one simple sentence. It's the right thing to do. Giving you a background of my client, Mike, when he was 18 years old, he is the son of 2 refugees from the nation of Iraq. He's a first-generation American. He loves his country. He felt so compelled to serve at the age of 18, he enlisted in the Special Operations of the United States Army, where he did 4 tours in Iraq in the face of some of the most violent criminals to walk this earth since the fall of the Third Reich. Furthermore, the United States government trusted him with top-secret security clearance as a member of Spec Ops. He has taken significant action in the investment of this store. He is certainly not a millionaire. He sold his house. He fell in love with someone in Minnesota, by the way. That's why he's here. He is originally from California as an American. Now, when he moved to Minnesota, he made a living. He saw an opportunity, and he convinced his wife it would be a good idea to sell his house in order to invest in a building in the city of White Bear Lake and start a tobacco store. And he did just that. Trust me, I gave him warnings not to put all of his eggs in one basket, but nevertheless, here we are. Anyways, after taking that action and being accused of committing a crime of a misdemeanor for not being in compliance with an ordinance that did not exist prior to the creation of his business, he asked what he could do. I explained, well, you could challenge it on a constitutional basis, but I do not recommend it. I recommended compliance. I recommended work with the city. The city wants to do a study. They have a right to do that. The city wants to learn about this. They want to do this in a proper way. They want to learn how to govern this. And he did just that. And he took a 60% hit on his business, by the way, when he did so. It was not easy. I wonder, after listening to the prior council meetings, I heard about the alcohol violation in the alcohol licensees. And it was said that oftentimes these are used as learning opportunities to explain how these ordinances work. And those, by the way, have existed for more than 30 years. This is a brand new one. It's less than a year old. My client's been given no opportunity as such. And I did request from the police department that they come in and let's sit down, let's have a meeting. I understand as well. I did request the meeting with our representative from our ward based on the situation. He declined, and that is understandable. However, we're still here. We're willing to talk. More importantly, I think if there was a time to use a learning opportunity with an ordinance violation, shouldn't it be the brand new one that just existed, that nobody knows anything about? That would be my opinion. We are not here to threaten or coerce the city into taking proper action. I'm here to attempt to convince the members of my community that is the right thing to do. And with that, I stand for any questions on behalf of my client. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holstead. I have one point of clarification, because at the end you talked about sitting down and talking about the ordinance, the moratorium, a violation. But prior to that, you emphatically said he's not violating it and went on a long list of how he wasn't properly charged, which I'll dispute, by the way. There was a citation issued, which does start a criminal proceeding, which is ongoing. That's directly from our city prosecutor.
There is not.
And I'm going to accept my city prosecutor that she's doing her job. So can you please clarify that for me? I really want to know what your position is. Do you feel as though your client is not violating the moratorium, or do you feel like they don't understand it and it's a notice issue?
I feel the city doesn't understand its own ordinance.
Well, I'm confident we do. That's not what my question is. So
No, it was your question. And by the way, I don't think you are, because you didn't follow your rules for the application in the first place. There is a standard that has been created by the actions that the city has taken against my client from the very beginning. However, I would clarify, there is no filed charges against my client. I've searched every database in the state to find these issued citations. I've requested from the police department the citation. It has not been charged. And by the way, a prosecutor cannot issue a citation. Only a police officer can. It was not issued to my client.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Council, does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Holstead? I think we'll hear from Nothing But Hemp at this time. Thank you.
Hello, members of the council. My name is Eva Droz, and I am owner of Nothing But Hemp in White Bear Lake. We are at 4762 Banning Avenue in downtown White Bear. And I am just here to say that when the moratorium was put into effect, we did comply. It did state that we could still carry products up to 0.1% THC. So we did pull most of our products that were over that, because state law is up to 0.3%. So we did comply. We took a huge hit on our sales. When they did shop our store, they did purchase products that were in accordance with your own moratorium. So I wasn't sure if there was a confusion, but we did comply, and we are complying. We did pull most of our products at that location that were over the 0.1%. So I just believe there was some confusion there. We are trying to follow the rules. We are doing what we can. We are testing all of our products. Most of our customers now have to drive to our other locations. It's been a huge hit on our business. So I'm just here to say that we have pulled all the products that fit your guys' ordinance for your city.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Susan Burns. I am an attorney, and I represent Nothing But Hemp. My address is 420 Summit Avenue, St. Paul, 55102. Not yet a resident of White Bear Lake. So, as you know, you passed a new ordinance in September of last year prohibiting the sale of cannabis products that exceed 0.1% THC. So I have communicated with the city attorney and with the city clerk and issued my opinion that my client was entitled to continue operations under well-established zoning precedents, and had several conversations with my client. I know the city attorney disagrees with my opinion. Even though I advised my client that I thought they could continue to operate with selling what was state legally compliant product, they had invested in the community and had been a good citizen of the community of White Bear Lake, and decided that they wanted to comply with your existing ordinance. So they pulled their product, as you heard from Ms. Droz, that exceeded 0.1% THC. that product was pulled from their shelves at a significant loss. So on November 21st, 2022, your excellent Chief of Police, Julie Swanson, sent a letter advising that compliance checks were done and would be referred for prosecution. And I share the same concerns as my distinguished colleague who addressed the due process issues, and I won't go over those again. I'll just reiterate that I share those same concerns. They said that my client would be hearing from a prosecutor and that THC sales of more than 0.1% were prohibited. So I received a copy of the letter. Nothing further was heard, so I assumed that the prosecutor decided that, oh, it's not worth charging because the products are compliant. So my client has never been charged, to my knowledge. Then on 3/10, there was another letter from Julie Swanson, Chief of Police, said that she's in that letter. She said that the officers visited and successfully purchased product on November 7, 2022. I looked at the police report and it said that on November 7, 2022, they did not purchase product. There is, and I requested the rest of the report. It refers to a subsequent report. I don't have a copy of that, so I don't know what is in that report. I've requested a copy but don't have it. But this letter also said that on March 6th, they purchased THC products and again reiterated that sale of THC products containing more than 0.1% is prohibited. So I'm here tonight and I have asked Mr. Gilchrist, what is the violation that is alleged to have occurred, because my client's products are compliant, and we're here because there's a possibility of suspending or not reissuing their tobacco license, and my client is legally compliant, and has never been charged or had an opportunity to defend themselves against any alleged violation of an ordinance. Your ordinance says it's a misdemeanor, so we don't have anything, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, and more importantly, I'd like to engage in a conversation to understand really what the issue is here, because my client is doing everything they can to comply, and still it seems that I don't really understand what this process is.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Council, do we have any questions for Ms. Burns? Thank you.
If I could, I would like you to issue the license to my client.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to defer to our city attorney a little bit on this to help the council understand and clarify what the status of a criminal complaint that's out there, a citation, what do we know about that?
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, so a number of things there. To just give you some context, remind how we got here. The licenses were up for renewal at the last meeting. Council expressed concern regarding compliance of these two businesses, specifically on the THC, selling THC products that violated the ordinance. My understanding, and we all know I'm not the prosecutor for the city, so I'm not directly involved in that piece of it, but I did engage in meetings with the prosecutor and had understood that a citation or a charge through the prosecutor had been issued. So that's where that came from, that reference. That was certainly my understanding. I'm not checking the criminal, citation system. I don't have access to that. I'm not a prosecutor. But really, regardless, I mean, there's also a civil component to this as well. This is also an administrative penalty that the city so far has elected not to issue. So you haven't gone down that route yet. But it's not exclusively criminal, is my point, a violation of this ordinance. And so it really is up to the council to determine whether you think that the activities that occurred, and of course you've heard that they, both licensees allege that they're not in violation. That's not the city's position, frankly. But it's up to you to decide whether or not you think that this issue is significant enough. A licensed business selling products that the city had found to be in violation of its ordinance is significant enough to constitute a basis on which to deny the tobacco licenses. And I will point out, and the council is aware of this, we discussed this at the last meeting, the list in the ordinance of tobacco violations in 1104 that serve as a basis for denial of a license is not exclusive to those that are listed. The preceding sentence specifically says the following list is not exhaustive or exclusive. That was as intentional as the language that was cited in the listed items. So this is really up to the council to make a decision on which way you want to go with this.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Councilmember Jones.
So regarding the moratorium, can we reread that back as far as what the specific language was, to be clear for everybody?
Sure. Give me just one moment, please.
And Councilmember Jones, while our city attorney pulls it up, are we specifically trying to find what the percentage was? I mean, are we
confusion anywhere within our police department, our police chief, our compliance officers, our city manager, as far as language that wasn't clear on what was?
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor and council, while this is pulling up here, so the ordinance focus, the interim ordinance focus on the THC products, and that's a defined term in the ordinance. And really, as we discussed several times, really the focus of that was that this is something brand new. It was really kind of a shock to a lot of local governments as to what do we do with this? Should we do anything? And if so, what? And so a number of communities adopted interim ordinances fairly shortly after that went into effect. You recall we had one before you, the ordinance before you, fairly early on, and there was some debate about, well, actually this has been legal prior, and this is really not a good thing for you to do, and some confusion, and then eventually, after some further clarification, the council ended up adopting an ordinance temporarily for a year prohibiting the sale of THC products. The point that's being made in the confusion is that there was concern among this council and others, frankly, not to stop businesses' sales of CBD products, for instance, those that have already been sold that have a small amount, referred to often as a trace amount of THC. I wasn't comfortable with just having an ordinance, frankly, that said trace amount, because what is that? And so in an attempt to accommodate that and the council's wishes of not making illegal, the CBD, or prohibiting CBD that was essentially not affected by the sale of, or the change in the law, was to create a de minimis exception. So it specifically says if it contains less than 0.1% of THC, then it's not subject to the interim ordinance. And what you're hearing this evening is saying that both businesses adjusted their business practice after that went into effect to ensure that they're not selling products that contain more than 0.1% THC. So that's the issue that we're hearing.
We're going to deliberate now. Let me just let us stay along with this line of thought for a minute, but I'm not opposed to you having another chance to speak. Anybody else have a follow-up or a comment to what our city attorney just said, or a thought on this in general?
Well,
Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I mean, I feel like we're going to get into a courtroom situation here, and we need evidence now. So it's like, all right, so if they're saying, oh, we removed the inventory, we're in compliance. We had 2 inspections fail. for a reason, I assume. So is it packaging? How do we know it's over 0.1%? I guess would be a question I have. Is there there must be a reason they failed the inspection and other businesses in town passed the inspection. They went in the shop, they found a product that I assume was packaged, labeled. I don't think we took it to a testing lab. Maybe that was happening. Maybe that happened. That'd be great. But what do we know about the violation specifically? I think we need to know that as we figure this out.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, yes, again, not the prosecutor, not directly involved in the purchase or the review of the product that was purchased or anything like that. But yes, under Minnesota law, there is a requirement that they have testing materials available for the products. And of course, there's limitations. The stated limitation in the statute is no more than 0.3% of any THC. And that's where I went down to 0.1, thinking that was de minimis. So yes, there are testing requirements on the products, and in my opinion, we can rely on that because it's required by statute that the manufacturers of these have the materials itemized on the materials, and often, as I understand it, there's a barcode essentially, or one of those scan codes that then provide you more detailed information regarding the contents of the material, the product.
Well, Mr. Mayor, do we have an answer on? Obviously, we sent an inspector in twice to these two businesses, and an inspection failed. So, do we have a report? Do we have product? Do we have a package that says 0.3%? We say, hey, that's more than 0.1%, so you're out of compliance. I mean, I assume there's something that we have something to lean on there.
Well, I think we do, and let me. So just sticking with that for a second, I'm trying to narrow the focus and wrap my head around exactly what you're saying. And for me, it's we have the compliance checks and two capable law enforcement officers or a capable law enforcement that on two separate occasions went in and conducted a compliance check, and in their learned understanding of our ordinance, of the moratorium, and what they were looking at, deemed it to be a violation of the law. And from there, then the case is now before the prosecutor to make a decision whether to move forward with charges, which it's my understanding is there's some more due diligence that needs to be done regarding that, and that it's effectively still being investigated. So that's why I say whether or not there's a criminal complaint filed or not yet, it is an ongoing investigation. And for those reasons, I think we have enough to say that they are violating our moratorium, and our city attorney has just educated us that that is a basis to deny a tobacco license. So that's how I see it. And those folks out there can testify and dispute the percentage and what it is, but we have our own people telling us that it does in fact violate the law, and frankly that's something that's for a criminal court to decide, and that's not before us at this particular evening. What we have is our law enforcement and our prosecutors saying that there was a violation of the moratorium. It is ongoing, and that is the basis which I think we have to operate and make a decision as to these applicants' tobacco licenses.
Can I ask another question along that line, then, Mr. Mayor? The city prosecutor works on the direction of us through the city manager, I assume. So we're communicating. I'll say it affirmatively. I hope we're communicating. I expect we're communicating that if they are in violation, over 0.1, in violation of the interim ordinance, the moratorium, that we would pursue prosecution. We're not making a discretionary, it's just a misdemeanor, no big deal. We should be clear. I want to be clear about that tonight. That's as a representing Ward 1, I assume that's what we're doing. Maybe you can answer that or not, or say that or agree to that.
Yes, I mean that's the discussions that we've had. I don't think anybody.
It's just a delay. It's just a process.
And I wouldn't even call it a delay. It's unfortunately these things take time, and we've been corresponding, and what we're looking at right now is that we're waiting for further evidence to come in, and then the intent is to move forward with a criminal complaint. That's where it's at. And as the city attorney has said, a formal charge is not necessary. We have latitude, we have discretion. We have a left and right lateral that goes beyond just simply whether a criminal charge is filed or not. So that's the basis from which I'm operating this. And I'll just speak for myself, and the council can weigh in. If, in fact, either of these shops are not violating the ordinance, then I have no problem granting them a tobacco license. That's the whole point of this. But we have evidence and reason to believe that both of these shops are in violation of the moratorium, and that alone forms the basis for me supporting a denial of their tobacco license. This is a compliance issue, and we can debate and dispute all night about, well, is it 0.01? The folks that this council has to rely on is telling us that there's a violation of the law. That's good enough for me. Councilmember Edbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, so we have a messy conversation. All right. The denial of a license is a big deal for a tobacco shop. That's their livelihood. That's what's at stake. That's not a trivial item. It's not a small thing. So we need to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row, our I's dotted and our T's crossed. I don't have that confidence. So I'm reading our own ordinance, and it says, I completely agree with the city attorney. It says the following list is not exhaustive or exclusive. On the other hand, every single bullet after that puts it in the context of tobacco violation, which is not THC violation. I think those are different. I think not exclusive or exhaustive is extraordinarily vague for the ability to now assert that a THC violation, different from, is the basis for denial of a livelihood. I think that's really vague. I don't know that passes my standard for reasonableness. The specific item, the applicant has been convicted of ... regulation related to tobacco products. That's our ordinance. I'm not seeing that the transgressions, which may or may not have existed, fit our ordinance. At least a reason. What my interpretation, Mayor, you're an attorney. I'm not. I defer. I'm not going to quibble on that with you. But from a reasonable person's reading, I'm not seeing that this charge fits inside our ordinance. And the other piece is I've got no evidence in front of me that the individuals charged, let alone convicted, and the idea that this is in process doesn't meet my understanding of what it means to have been found guilty, convicted. I've got no documentation, no police report, no specification of here is what the product was, here's how we interpreted that the product was indeed more than 1%. All right, I got an issue, and I'm not feeling good about trying to interpret what we have in front of us where the penalty meets the transgression. All right, having said that, the issue that does concern me is the interpretation that businesses did not try and take us seriously and that they were flawed. Okay, I'm recapping parts of our conversation that businesses were not showing respect for our community by selling product that was clearly illegal and unlabeled. I don't have evidence of that. It may exist. I don't have it, and so I'm not in a position to make a judgment on that. But I think our discussion at our last council meeting got a bit emotional in the sense of here are these folks that are doing such terrible stuff that they are flaunting our community standards. If they were, I would be on board with taking action. I don't have that evidence, and I don't have that confidence that I'm in a position of making that adjudication tonight.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with some of what you said, not all of what you said. The section of code basis for denial of a license, you guys are focused on number 2, the applicant has been convicted, and then you made the claim that even number 5, the applicant or license holder has outstanding fines, penalties, charges, or property taxes owed to the city. Property taxes have nothing to do with tobacco licensing. So I think your logic is a little off. I think that property tax thing in there looks to me like I have a little more discretion, and it doesn't really say about fines. Where is it again? Fines, penalties, charges. Those could be related to tobacco violations. They might not be, though. That might be that all-encompassing, are you a business in good standing in the city? Have you paid your property taxes? If you haven't paid your property taxes, it's nothing to do with what you're selling. You could be selling anything and not pay your property taxes. You're not a business in good standing. So I think we've got room in the statute to act. Now, I think the other part of what you're saying is we're in court now, so we use legal terms. Ripeness, right? Is it ripe? I mean, we have inspections, we have failures, we have our staff telling us they were out of compliance. We don't have it in front of us yet. They haven't been charged. That hasn't gone through the process, so they don't have it yet. Is it ripe? So I might share your caution. I think we have every right, based on what we've got, to do it within the ordinance. I think we got to figure out if it's ripe, and if I'll just leave it at that. And then it's a little bit of discretion. Do I need to wait for that charge? Do I need to wait for that? I feel like it's coming down the pike. We've been assured that we're not going to, we're going to take it seriously. We're going to communicate to our city attorney to take it seriously. There will be a fine eventually under the ordinance, assuming the evidence is there. So let me ask a question then, just knowing that. The action we're talking about doing tonight is denial of a tobacco license that expires on March 31st, April 1st. What are the ramifications of that act, I guess? Let me know a little bit more about that. What's the recourse, I guess? I mean, is there a process? Is there a path to get back in compliance quickly? Is it out for a year? Can they reapply? Can we get in compliance? Can we make sure that we are in compliance with the 0.1% and our moratorium, and then having get these two fines go through the process? Maybe they have to be paid, and maybe another inspection has to be done to make sure we're in compliance, and to which point we can reinstate the tobacco license. What kind of flexibility do we have, I guess, is my question.
Mr. Gilchrist.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, the ordinance does not have a prohibition on reapplying. Okay. So sometimes you'll see that in the code that you 6 months, 12 months, that sort of thing. I'm not seeing one in here. So presumably they could reapply shortly after a revocation. As far as your ability to add conditions or somehow, I guess I'm having a hard time thinking what those may be. You mentioned a couple. You might be able to do that. I mean, frankly, it's in my experience there. First of all, I haven't been involved in many straight-out revocations, certainly suspensions and fines for violating an ordinance like this, a licensing ordinance. But as we discussed at the last meeting, I believe, you certainly do have the option to suspend for a period of time, which you could condition that on, ending that period if there's compliance. The revocation, frankly, is a little bit more difficult because that is a stop business. Mm-hmm. Of course, suspension is as well, but it's for a temporary period. And I think with a revocation, I really don't see adding conditions to that. I think that would be more in the spirit of suspension. Here are the conditions that you might be able to comply with to cut a suspension period down.
You say revocation. This is a non-renewal. Is that one and the same?
Yeah. Okay. Functional, yeah.
Councilmember Edberg.
Member Walsh and I can have our non-lawyers lawyerly conversation about whether a business owes money, which is, I think, the interpretation that there's a financial discharge. I'm still not buying it, but that's okay. Those are the same as charges. Fines, charges.
When do we get fined?
The issue that I want to go to is I have every suspicion that in 6 months, maybe less, state law is going to change, and we're going to have this conversation is going to be moot. My sense is that a better alternative might be, okay, if we had the evidence in front of me, I am not afraid to act. I don't feel that I've got
the documentation in front of me that gives me confidence in depriving somebody of their livelihood. If I had it, I'd be willing to act. But I don't. So what I might think we might do is some kind of, okay, maybe we don't have all of the cards in our hand that we thought we had. Let's allow, we'll extend, but make folks know that there are, that we will be continuing to do random checks during the remainder of this, while this moratorium is still in effect, that we will know and document and charge and make sure we dot every I and cross every T. Consider yourself forewarned. Something along those lines, and then we wait for what happens in the legislature, because I have a strong suspicion this is not going to be the same issue in 4 months.
Councilmember Jones.
I find it hard to disagree with Councilmember Edberg, but I do. We got 5 businesses that are tobacco shops in the city of White Bear, 3 of which have chosen to obey the moratorium. 2 have not. 2 said, I've lost 60% of my business. That means the other damn 3 have not been able to have their business. But you have chosen to say, yep, 0.1, BS, you're selling 0.22, whatever. It's over the 0.1. Product was purchased today. So what gives you the right to ignore a moratorium and say, I'm doing it, but yet sell product that is over the amount, where I've got other businesses that are doing it, so that are staying with the moratorium and obeying the makes me mad, because they're passing up business too, and I find it ironic that you're passing up business that didn't exist before July. That's really ironic. No. I'm not yielding the floor, Mr. Mayor. I just look at it and go, look for the businesses that are complying. And what are we doing for them? How are we going to compensate them? Because I just look at it and go, products are being purchased that add up to, you add up the 3 things, and it's over 0.1. So, and if tobacco gives us this wiggle room, Mr. City Attorney, to therefore do something, well, then I'm going to propose to say, you know what, Mr. Edberg, I get that things are going to change. I get it. So I want to at least say, let's have the conversation. I'll suspend their tobacco license until they change, until the state comes out. So we'll do it temporary, meet in the middle. Because to sit there and claim you got the first citation, don't do that, that's the nice one. You got the second one, and we're not going to trust that our police officers, for 16 years, we've gone alcohol compliance, tobacco, we've never questioned, do we need evidence? Is this criminal? Is it criminal, or is it an administrative motion, what we're looking at tonight? I don't think it has anything to do with criminal charges. Will do what they do. This is an administrative fee to do business within the city of the White Bear Lake. What does it have anything to do with criminal charges? Could you help clarify that for me, Mr. City Attorney?
Sure. Mr. Mayor and Council, you're correct. I mean, this is a civil process to determine whether or not to renew a license, tobacco license. I mean, the question is, what's the foundation for making a decision perhaps to deny or not renew, I should say. And that's where the question is, are they in violation of selling products that are in violation of the city's moratorium? And again, it really isn't solely dependent on whether or not charges have actually been brought yet. Because like I said, it really is a civil civil violation as well. The penalty for violating the moratorium is both a misdemeanor as well as can be pursued through a civil action, as well as can be pursued by the city through its administrative enforcement action. So far the city at a staff level has been talking with the prosecutor about the criminal side of it, but that doesn't preclude the civil enforcement options that you have available to you.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I'd be in favor of listening, having a conversation, if you are, Mayor.
Ms. Burns, you said you wanted an opportunity to reply. Please step up to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm aware that product was purchased today. I'm not aware of what product except for one. I looked up the testing. It was a beverage, and it's 2%, so it's well under the 1%. I don't know how you arrive at a figure of 2.2%. I do note that in the police reports, although I am missing one, the observation is various Delta 9 THC edibles sold in packages of 5 milligrams. They can be 5 milligrams, which is the new limit. Before they could sell in higher limits before the amendments July 1, 2022. But they can sell it in 5 milligrams, but it can still be 0.1%. It can be 0.05% THC. So I think there's confusion about the amount of milligrams in the package, and I conveyed this to City Attorney Gilchrist. Also, one of them notes that various THC edibles sold in packages of 10 milligram increments. The 10 milligram increments are 5 milligrams of THC, less than 0.1%, and 5 milligrams of CBD. So it's a compliant product. A refrigerator full of various Delta THC 9 seltzers. Again, if you look at the testing, it's compliant. It's less than 0.1% or at 0.1%. So if you're saying the client is in violation, but there is no substantiation of that violation, and you want to suspend, revoke, or whatever of their license and take that adverse impact, how do they correct something that they don't know what they should correct because they're already, and no, my client is not trying to flaunt anything. They are in earnest trying to comply with your ordinance. So there is, I mean, and I know your police officers are doing a good job. I'm not trying to say they're not, but the THC and the measurement of the THC is an entirely different thing. The other one from earlier this month, I selected a package, Delta 9 THC, 5 milligrams per piece with a quantity of 10. That's all it says. There's nothing about the quantity of THC, and that's what's at issue. This is a very serious allegation that the client is flaunting or violating an ordinance or a statute, and they are very earnestly trying to comply, and I'm very earnestly trying to understand how do we comply with something when there isn't a standard that is able to be complied with, and there is no due process. So how does my client comply?
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Hang on. So I'm going to try and boil this down as simply as I can. I'm not a chemist. I'm just a guy reading a package and a guy reading an ordinance, and it says that you shall not sell something that contains 0.1% of any cannabinoid. This package says total cannabinoids 0.114, total Delta 9 THC 0.111. Ingredients may contain up to 3% THC. How else am I supposed to interpret this? I want someone to educate me, because this is the crux of where we're at. So someone tell me why I'm wrong. Please, Mr. Holstad.
Thank you. Your Honor, my question is, what are you reading that off of?
I'm reading this off of Blue Dreams Gummies that was purchased at Nothing But Hemp earlier today.
Okay, I cannot speak on behalf of that. Thank you.
I can speak on that as well. The warning label on there that you read, product contains less than 0.3%. That's a standard thing that's on all of our labels because that is the state law. So it has to be on every single one of our products. It's a standard statement, like a warning label on a product. So all products will say is under 0.3% THC because that's the state law. The Delta 9 is the one that's at the 0.1. So the
0.111, which exceeds 0.10.
Yes, and there is variance. So you send it to a lab, you get 4 different results. So that was in the variance that we are allowed.
But that's not what the ordinance says. It doesn't say 0.1% with some variance. So all this body has to go off of is what your own label says. And that is the basis for why this council is deliberating denial. So, Councilmember Edberg, I can appreciate everything you're saying. It's not a little thing to deny someone's license and take away their livelihood. And there is no smoking gun. If there was, this would be easy. That's why we're debating it. That's why folks are passionate on both sides. But to me, it's as clear as can be. And the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't need a formal criminal charge to form the basis of the denial. The fact that this was purchased, the fact that we've had 2 compliance checks where similar products were purchased is enough within this statute because it's not just a criminal charge. If you read the statute as a whole, including some of the police powers found within our ordinance, we have a right to protect the health and safety of our citizens, and it's within this body's determination to decide whether or not this threatens that, and that's where I come down on this. So thank you for clarifying the numbers. If I'm hearing you correctly, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're not disputing that this package contains 0.111% THC or 0.114% THC.
Yes, correct. But I was explaining the warning label. And something else I wanted to address earlier, I know Walsh had brought this up, if it was properly communicated to the officers who are conducting the compliance checks. My employees did say that the officers didn't know what they were looking for. They thought if there was any amount of THC at all, that it was a violation. They actually showed them your guys' ordinance, showed them the 0.1%, and they said that's not what we were told. We were told that any amount of THC is a violation. So there was some communication errors between, I don't know how the communication flow works with you guys, but between them and the officers doing the check as well. So I just wanted to state that out.
I appreciate your comments. I have no reason to dispute that our officer, I have no reason to confirm what you just said. I'm not calling you a liar, but I have no reason to confirm that, nor do I have any reason to dispute the competency of our officers. So I'm going to take them at their word that they confirmed that they completed the compliance check within the bounds of the law, and that they knew the statute and the law going in, and that they knew what to look for. That's who I'm going to believe right now, but I do appreciate your comments. Councilmember Jones.
A follow-up question?
Yes.
So that happened twice? There was confusion, both violations?
On the second one, my employee working is the one who told me that when they came in, they said, we were told any amount of THC was a violation. And we actually have your guys' ordinance on the wall at our store, so our employees also know. And they said, no, we're allowed to have up to 0.1. And the officers just said, we were told that any amount was a violation. I also believe they had a similar experience. So that was my understanding from my employee.
Thank you.
Council?
Well, I want to make sure, I'd like to see what Mr. Holstead has to say. Just,
Thank you.
I think it's valuable. So if you have anything to add.
Appreciate the opportunity. I do respectfully disagree with your city attorney's take on the ability to deny the license. There's a standard that has not been stated by the council or the city attorney yet, and that is arbitrary and capricious. This is a civil proceeding. I don't dispute that. It is different than a criminal proceeding. There are still, however, bounds of which the city must follow. That standard is arbitrary and capricious. Now, I will say it's one of those things where you know it when you see it, and when you state a basis for the denial, it actually takes into account the arbitrary and capricious standard then as to what that basis was and what the evidence for that basis was. And if it was we think they may have committed a crime, that is arbitrary and capricious. You need more evidence than that. I understand that you are relying on your officers, and I will second that from my experience that was just explained. When I was there, the officer admitted, I don't know what a violation is, of which my response was, so is that a failure of a compliance or not? And he says, well, it'll just be put in a report to the city. So the basis of having failed the compliance check is actually baffling to me, and I think it's baffling to my client. And to be honest, it's a little concerning hearing a lot of the council members speak. It seems as if you already conceded that my client violated the ordinance when there really isn't enough evidence to determine that, and we have no witnesses here as to specifying specifically what it was they purchased. Now, I understand not a criminal proceeding. However, due process still applies, and the arbitrary and capricious standard is what the city is held to. Now, there is specific action that our client could also take in response to the non-renewal of the license, and that is a writ of mandamus. A writ of mandamus would be brought by an attorney demanding that a district court in fact issue the license of which my client is entitled to. I believe under the arbitrary and capricious standard, we're there if the basis of the denial is the accusation of failing to comply with this ordinance, which, again, I believe my client has complied.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Councilmember Walsh.
Mr. Holton, do you think you're getting due process tonight? We delayed this decision 2 weeks ago on the advice of our attorney because you weren't here. Thought that was a good decision. I was ready to do it 2 weeks ago. I think some others were too.
This is a good start,
it's
yes.
Due process.
It's a good start. It's getting there. Now, remember, due process, arbitrary and capricious are two different things. If we're talking due process in the criminal context, absolutely not.
We're not. We're not a criminal process.
Okay. If you're talking due process in the civil matter, we are getting due process. We're getting towards that basis. But the basis of the approval or the denial must not be in violation of the arbitrary and capricious standard. I think a denial in this case would be based on the stated basis. Again, I did mention in my opening statements, I understand the code is written to say this is not exhaustive. However, when you specifically list bases, people make decisions that their life depends on based on those written ordinances. And they say, okay, theoretically, I mean, come on, we don't actually do that, but theoretically, that is how the law views it. This could make me lose my license. 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 What I'm hearing from the council today is whatever we decide can make you lose your license.
But all the words have meaning. All of the words in the statute have meaning, not just some. So,
yeah, and the more words you use in specific bases actually dissuades the analysis of the value of the whatever we decide could be a violation.
Do you understand? It's an argument.
Okay, so you understand. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that, and I do appreciate that. With all due respect, I mean, we're going to sit here and disagree all night. Like I said about the officers who conducted the compliance checks, I have no reason to doubt their skill and expertise, and I'm going to stand by our city attorney based on his reading of state law, of case law, and that's just where I come down. So we're not here to litigate that. I mean, if you want to continue to write a would-be complaint up there, I get where you're going with this. I understand. But this council is going to get its education for what the arbitrary and capricious standard is from the city attorney whose charge it is to advise this council. So thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask, what the police report I read didn't indicate that there was any violation. I don't understand where it's coming from.
It is my knowledge that there has been a citation issued. That is what we have a record of, and you can stand up there and dispute it and say I don't have a record of citation.
I don't dispute it. It's actually a fact. It is not issued. It has not been issued. That is not disputable from the city's bases. I am telling you now, it has not been issued. Only an officer can issue a citation. That's it.
That's correct.
That was never issued. It never was. Is there an officer testifying to have issued a citation?
This isn't a criminal proceeding for officers to testify.
No, this is a civil one, and you're accusing my client of having received a citation, which he never did. And that is basically, actually, it's not basically, that is defamation per se. You are saying my client is charged with a crime, and he is not. And this is important. You cannot claim that people are charged with a crime when they are not.
I'm going to give our city attorney a chance to respond. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, as I stated earlier, it was our understanding that the citation had been issued. If it hasn't, it's certainly been in process. It's been discussed for actually quite a long time. So whether it had been issued or not, frankly, isn't a factor that depends on whether or not you find there was a violation of your moratorium. That's certainly one of the avenues, as I explained earlier. There's also civil and administrative penalties that can be issued as well. I think it's important that we not get into a back and forth match on this. The attorney has stated his position. Really, it comes back down to whether or not you as a council are comfortable that you think you have a sufficient basis, which, by the way, is stated in the resolution. So this is not an arbitrary and capricious decision. It's whether or not you feel that you have a sufficient basis to make that decision. And the findings are set in the resolution. You can supplement those if you'd like. You can change them if you disagree with any of them. But staff was charged with bringing forward options to the council. That's what we did. You have them before you, and you need to make a decision.
Council, what would we like to do? Thank you, Mr. Holstead.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Hughes.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I'm kind of uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable taking away their license to do business based on he said, she said, and I don't want to doubt our cops at all. So I think they probably went in there and did their best work. I think that this is so confusing. What you can have, what you can't have, what you can sell, what you can't sell. I don't want them to sell any of it. The state said they can. I don't know that I want to sit here and sometimes I feel like it's, this is more about the fact that, in the future there's going to be these kinds of sales. But regardless, I also feel like I'm not going to explain this very well. Sometimes as an individual, there's a little Henry David Thoreau. There's a little, the state isn't always right. The law isn't always right. And that's why we go through the court system and we finagle it out and we argue about it. And I get that this isn't criminal, but this is sort of feeling very like a sledgehammer. And there's enough question for me here that I'm uncomfortable at this point, and so talk me out of it, but I'm uncomfortable denying them their license based on the conversations that we've had tonight.
Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am comfortable. I think we have the authority to act tonight based on the basis for denial of license. I think Councilmember Jones said it the best. It's not no one's accusing people of crimes tonight. We're accusing people of failing compliance checks, and we do this every year. We have lots of businesses come through that we license, and alcohol and tobacco and other things. And based on compliance check failure, which I don't believe is arbitrary and capricious, they've failed two compliance checks. I think we're perfectly in our right to deny the tobacco license tonight. I think from the political perspective, because I'm not a judge, it's business in good standing. I'm just going to keep going back to that. They're not a business in good standing. We need to have our businesses in good standing. We need to have nobody flaunting the law. I appreciate what Councilmember Jones said about other stores didn't fail the compliance check. So I assume other stores didn't have product in there that was sold visible with THC in it. There's a reason some passed and some failed. And I think that's the heart of the failure of the compliance check. I think it's enough. And I want the businesses to get in compliance fast. And then if there's a way to come back and apply for the tobacco license, I'll be absolutely willing to do that. But we can't be chumps either. We've got to represent the city and not. You say he said, she said. Well. I'm going to go with our staff. I'm going to go with our process. I'm going to go with our our compliance check process. They failed 2 checks. We have an ability, I believe, under the statute or the code or to deny the authority. So I'm ready to move the resolution. I guess it doesn't have a number on it. The longer of the resolutions that denies the license, and then, like I said, hope that they get in compliance fast and we can revisit this because of my question before. So I'm ready to move the bigger resolution.
So is that an official motion?
Yeah.
Actually, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing.
I know.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, have we ever denied in a tobacco license or an alcohol license in the past? Have we ever not re-granted whatever we're calling this?
I don't know. I don't know if it's relevant either.
I'm sure we have.
I'd like to know if this is a pattern of behavior that we've engaged in before, or if this is the very first time that we've not given someone a license renewal.
Mayor, Councilmember Hughes, I don't have that historical knowledge off the top of my head. I know that the council has suspended various liquor licenses for significant violations based on compliance checks and things that our officers have observed. But I don't have that exhaustive list.
Any further discussion? Councilman Jones, did you have something?
So, I want to listen to all the opinions. So we have Mr. Wilstead up here. May he speak if he has something that he's looking to specifically respond to.
I just have a actually specific question for Mr. Walsh, because he was saying his hope is with the accused. I don't even like using that word.
Yeah, I want to say
get in compliance and reapply. My understanding of this moratorium is it is also a moratorium on the issuance of tobacco licenses.
you lost me. Our moratorium has to do with THC 0.1%.
No, we do not have a.
There's a separate one.
Oh, correct. You're right.
I was going to say something different. But go ahead. No, you go ahead and clarify. Clarify what the moratorium status is.
Actually, that just popped in my head. If you recall, this was first approached as a bundled moratorium, and then council directed that they be split apart. So the speaker is correct that there is currently a moratorium on tobacco licenses as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong, would my client be capable of applying for a tobacco license, of which I explained our severe difficulty in doing so in the first place?
How long is that moratorium?
So we would have the ability, Mr. City Attorney, we can do whatever we want. I mean, we could lift the moratorium. We can, in the event later, if they wanted to apply for a tobacco license, we put the moratorium in place.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, you would have to amend the moratorium, which you do have the authority to do. But, right, you'd comply with the provisions as they exist now, which, again, I don't have it right in front of me, but moratorium prohibits the issuance of license. There is an exception, though, for current operations.
If I may interject, the moratorium is a prohibition of expansion or new tobacco licenses. I'm not the city attorney, but I am the city manager. I do not believe that this would be a new license.
Okay.
I think the point here is this council has an appetite to, if there's no longer a continuing violation of the THC moratorium, we would have an appetite to do whatever is necessary to amend the tobacco moratorium, including properly noticing it, having it go before a public hearing, change it, to make such an accommodation, I think is what the point is. All right, so is there any further discussion on this, Councilmember Jones? And Mr. Holstead, we are going to be done. I can appreciate it, and I think I've given you a long leash for going back and forth, but now it's time for the council to deliberate this. Thank you,
Your Honor. Thank you.
And I will just add one thing. When we originally began discussing the THC moratorium, I think this council, with the best of intentions, let testifiers have a very long leash, and it did nothing but confuse this dais. And I'll take full blame for that, for letting it get out of hand. And maybe I've done it again tonight, but I'm doing it with the best of intentions so that people can have a chance to be heard. But I remind this body that the police officers that work for this city, the city attorney who's retained by this city, is the one that I think we should be listening to, and they're the ones that have 2 failed compliance checks that they're reporting, and despite what has been said regarding .01, .11, if this body feels it has sufficient evidence that, based on advice of counsel, that it is within our authority to deny this license, that is what should form the basis, not some of the muddying of the waters that has occurred tonight. Any further discussion on this? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to vote against the motion. I'm not comfortable that I have sufficient evidence to make that judgment and terminate a livelihood. I further think that there is a reasonable chance that we could be, now, our insurance will probably cover us in case, but I don't want to be sued. I'm just saying, that's a legitimate outcome.
Councilmember Jones.
Yes, we have denied licenses, maybe not tobacco. I can't think of one offhand. We've suspended. Huh?
I can't either.
Right. Not the tobacco in its sense. This is getting difficult. Muddy is a good word. Have I been? Been known to flip on a dime right here. But I got a question, Mr. Mayor, maybe the city attorney. What I am waiting over the river to Mr. Walsh's point of view, we're having a love fest this evening, is I don't want THC, period. If it's going to be this messy over this long a time, and Mr. Walsh, and I told you a little story about my mother, my beautiful almost 89-year-old mother. She's like, well, why do we need another way to get drunk or get high? Why do we have to regulate? Why do we have to police? Why do we have to enforce? Why do we have to make compliance checks? I think I'm there this evening. So with that said, I'm like, Mr. City Attorney, God, the microphone is really weird. Mr. City Attorney, is there any way we can adjust our moratorium that we have in place to say, that's fine. I'm going to agree with Mr. Edberg on this resolution this evening, but I'm going to say no THC of any kind can be sold within White Bear Lake as hey, we put it on the next agenda, and that's the way the moratorium is until the state rolls out whatever they do, which my understanding is we will still have that ability to keep that moratorium intact. Is that a yes or a no or a maybe or you don't know?
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, the interim ordinance that you adopted on THC products is your ordinance, and you have the ability to amend it. So, yes, you could take out or modify the 0.1% if that's the source of confusion. Again, this was being drafted in a time when there was a lot of uncertainty as to what these products are, how they're difference between milligrams and percentages and all that. So certainly a lot has been learned since then, and it can be amended.
I mean, I don't want to, so Council, I don't want to take away Mike's livelihood. I don't. Appreciate your service. Thank you. Sincerely. But, nothing but hemp. Sorry, you had your owner sitting right there saying, we're closing White Bear, but man, THC 9's in play right now in July, and we're open. He was sat right there, if you want to call any of this testimony of whatever, and said we were going to close the White Bear location. Unless I'm having too much THC number 9 right now, and I can't recall it clearly. But am I wrong, Council? Did we not hear that? So the Boone, we've got video, we've got records on that, and I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong. But nonetheless, I don't know. I mean, maybe I will flip and say, let them sell the smokes, and we'll go from there, and turn around and re-look at THC. And go, do we want it in our town at all? Period. If the state allows us that come up in May, but they sure as heck do right now. Then we can say, no, I don't want it sold at all within our city limits, period. Moratorium, new one. I'm looking for discussion. If no one else wants to play, I will probably vote no.
Well, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Mayor.
Promotion,
sorry.
but no, it's still mayor.
I spent too much time in the Minnesota staff in the House. Well, Councilmember Jones, I mean, an ordinance change takes time. We have a process. It's months. Well, yeah. And then the other thing to consider here is, there was discussion earlier of the legislature acting. The legislature may act, but it may have a year to roll that new law out. So our moratorium stance, whatever we want to make it, we may have control for more than just. My point is, the legislature may act in May. The law might not take effect on July 1. The law might take effect July 1 for the following year, where the city would still remain some control. And we could act at that time. We could say, okay, this is coming, so let's get an ordinance in place. This is going to be the new regime. That's why we put the 1 year on it in the first place. So I don't know if I just think we should decide on the tobacco license tonight and go from there.
Any further discussion on this? I have a motion and a second for the resolution denying the tobacco business license for M&J Tobacco Incorporated and Nothing But Hemp. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Nay.
By a vote of 3-2, this resolution fails. We have another resolution before us approving the tobacco licenses of M&J Tobacco and Nothing But Hemp. I would entertain a motion on that.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
By a vote of 3-2, the motion carries and the resolution approving the licenses is approved. Thank you.
No.
I don't want to hear the clap. We've been fair.
Mayor, if I may.
Please.
I want to reiterate, maybe for those certainly in the audience and those watching and will watch, we're going to continue to do compliance checks for THC. We're going to continue. I bought these myself today. The city didn't buy these. Good. Yeah, you have my card file. We're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue down this process.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 8A, concurrent detachment and annexation of certain property to the city of Mahtomedi. Mr. Gilchrist, are you taking this?
I am, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
All right, thank you. Mayor and Council, this is a request that the city received some months ago from the city of Mahtomedi. There is a 100-foot wide strip of land that I'm not sure how we ended up with that, but it's essentially a finger that extends down into the city of White Bear Lake. And the city approached staff, me and the city manager, asking if there would be willingness to forward this to the council. The idea of shifting boundaries between cities is called a concurrent detachment annexation. You've heard of annexation where a city annexes township property. This is a city-to-city concurrent detachment annexation. This is approximately 1.3 acres of property, so not a lot of property. We did have some discussions with the city about do the owners, are they aware of this? Are they opposed to it or not? And so the city did make an effort, Mahtomedi, when I say city, made an effort to reach out to those owners. There was a question from one of the owners, as I understand it, but not necessarily opposition. I did suggest that you go first, the other city, and so the other city did go first and did adopt the resolution that you have before you to adopt the resolution concurring with or agreeing to this annexation. And then it would be up to the city of Mahtomedi to file that with the state and complete that process. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gilchrist. I just have one question, and I'm not sure it's for you. It probably is for Ms. Crawford. Is there any appreciable fallout in tax revenue by giving up this land?
Of course, the mayor, members of the council, of course, the answer is yes, we're going to lose some tax value. It is not significant. We do still cover utilities in this area, but we're not going to lose. I think for the greater good of economic development for this corner, for Matamidi, and which would ultimately result for the city of White Bear Lake, I do believe that this is will be a benefit in the long run.
Makes sense. Councilmember Walsh.
Have we done any soil testing? Is there any precious metals in this land? Maybe some oil, crude? Are we sure what we're doing? Why was this little piece still in our possession? I mean, I'm just kidding.
We have to worry about groundwater, water movement, lake litigation, never mind.
I think what Councilmember Walsh says is we want the gold. I mean, there could be a lot of gold in there. Okay. Well, I'd entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The concurrent attachment annexation resolution passes. Item 9, discussion. We have nothing scheduled. Item 10, communication from the city manager. Ms. Crawford.
Mayor, members of the council, just one slide tonight with a couple of upcoming events. As Chief Swanson said, there is an Easter egg hunt. Registration is full. There's 2 sessions of 50 children participants, so that is Saturday, April 1st, this Saturday, and it's full. And then we have a ribbon cutting for Cajita, I hope I'm saying that right, coffee. Cajita? Cajita. I'm sorry. Tuesday, April 4th at 3:30 p.m. I've been there. Staff has been there a few times. It's really good coffee. I encourage you to attend the ribbon cutting and check it out. And that's all I have for tonight.
Councilmember Edberg.
Ms. Crawford, are these Easter egg programs an opportunity for us to recruit future police officers by their interaction with our fine gendarmes?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Start them early.
Might be an opportunity to improve the council's humor.
All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Or adjourn.